time flies, and it's been almost 30 years as I am professionally involved in information technology, specifically computer system and network engineering. And 30 years ago, I kind of made that spontaneous decision to start collecting CPUs. CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. And over 30 years, I've collected over 100 different CPUs, and some of them you can see is on my little exposition here in my office. And I thought maybe I'll do a little show and tell, just some of the CPUs that kind of cool and unique and kind of comes up in memory. And first one I'd like to start is this particular model. This is Intel 8086, and this CPU is made famous by a company called IBM. This was the very first IBM PC, IBM personal computer, that they released in 80s, and they used that particular processor. Now down below here I have actually counterfeit copies of Russian replica of 8086. So they also tried, clearly. The other one I wanted to show you is this processor. As you can see, processor different. It's now a square shape. It has a lot of pins at the end. And what's so good about this processor? This is very first Pentium with MMX instruction set. This was designed to process graphics, multimedia, and we're talking about over 20 years ago. Now this processor has over 10 times more transistors on its chip as compared to the very first processor. The next one I want to show you guys are two very unique processors. This one is Intel Pentium Pro. Again, you can see this is a very wide buffer that they used, to accommodate all the transistors on the chip. Such design is not used, never been used again. As you can see, Intel Pentium Pro is very unique looking processor. And what's even more unique looking processor is Pentium 2. Pentium 2 came right after Pentium Pro, and this was the only processor that Intel designed to do with the slot type of the connector. Not pins, but slot. And it's ended up being very bulky, very difficult to provide air cooling, and Intel avoided that processor style ever going forward. And next I'd like to move on to more modern processors. The i3, i5, and i7 series. It's again started about 15 years ago. Processors became much smaller in size. Why? Because you need to make sure that you have enough space on the motherboard for the other components. They continue to use pin structure, still over 100 pins located at the back of the processor. Number of transistors increased 100 times on a i7 level processors compared to its predecessors. And they also adopted that as much surface possible for air cooling. Cooling became a really big problem on this series of processors. And moving on, the next series of processors, still i3, i5, i7, but the big difference is they walked away from golden pins at the back, and they start using those what's called the connector pad. So there's no pins anymore. Pins are easy to bend, easy to break, and now you just sit the processor into the slot, and slot connects all the connectors properly. And lastly, I want to show you guys one of the modern processors. As you can see, it's probably twice the size of i-series processors, and those are what's called Xeon processors. Xeon used on servers. What's special about these processors? They actually have multiple cores within the same unit, so it could have almost like dedicated processors inside the processor. Could be even 16 cores, and each one of them is hyper-threaded. Gives you up to 32 execution cores per physical CPU. Again, those processors are used on servers. If you think of the clouds, Amazon, Azure, AWS, they're all running on servers that's running off these type of Xeon processors. Yes, there's other brands, but Intel Xeon probably the most prominent of them. Well, welcome to my show and tell. Next time I'll show you a new processor if I run across one.